Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Education Committee and this Assembly have called on the Education Minister and selective schools to set out a contingency to post-primary transfers since May 2020. We all knew it was entirely possible that testing would be disrupted by the pandemic this year, not by any political party, by a pandemic. What children, parents and teachers have been put through by the Education Minister and some selective schools in relation to post-primary transfer is not acceptable. It is clearly not possible for testing to take place this year. I have been open on the alternative to the Minister. The Department of Education admission criteria recommended to all publicly funded schools, so I ask the Education Minister and selective schools who would wish to add academic selection to this criteria to set out now the safe and fair academic criteria you would use when testing is not possible.
Look, I'm open to any suggestions that are put forward. Let me make it clear. First of all, schools have been written to some time ago. In terms of any criteria that they are producing, there's a deadline for all schools to produce that by the 2nd of February. It is up to schools to set their own criteria. But there is no easy way, first of all, of doing academic selection without some form of test. Now, the member seems to be able to judge ahead of what the position will be, for example, in 2 months' time, what public health position will be, what public health mitigations can be put in place. I want children to have the opportunity to apply and indeed have a fair chance of getting a place at the school that they want. And the problem ultimately is that there is no, but again I'm open to suggestions in relation to this, there is no clear way in which academic selection can take place, no obvious way, without some form of test. And without that, in terms of the criteria, all criteria will have a level of unfairness towards one pupil or another. It depends in many ways, for example, what your family links in with that school is, whether you have a sibling at that school, whether you have a teacher who is connected up with that school, what your proximity to that school is, and whatever. The problem is that whatever criteria is used, there is clearly a problem in terms of fairness, and there is no solution to that which is perfect within that. So I'm open to any particular suggestions in which academic selection can then be used, but let us not crystal gaze as to what the position will be in terms of any level of mitigation that can be put in place for the end of February. These are private organisations that put forward the proposals, but anything that is done has got to be in line with public health mitigations.
Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, I respectfully say you cannot keep washing your hands of this urgent situation. We have the absurdity that children and young people will gain admission to university without an exam, and you insist that there will be a possibility to sit tests for 10-year-olds. You need to move on. You need to put forward solutions. Minister, GCSE, AS and A-level pupils have also been put through unacceptable distress this year. So I also ask the Education Minister to set out now the alternative arrangements for GCSE, AS and A-level grading this year, and to seek his assurance that there will be no repeat of the grading fiasco over which he ministered in summer 2020.
And Happy New Year to the member as well. The position in terms of this is that in terms of university places, there will be options because of the fact that there is a much greater level of data that can be within schools, can therefore use to generate grades. That is not the same position across the board as in primary schools, and so we're not comparing like with like in relation to that. The member says that some of the difficulties that we faced, for instance, in 2020, where things had to be done very quickly, and indeed across the board in different jurisdictions, problems arose. I'm determined to try to make sure that those do not happen, which means that we've been working with CCA, they've been working on contingency arrangements. Those will be produced as soon as they are feasible, but it is also the case that we need to make sure that these are got absolutely right. And so simply if we produce something which is just off the shelf, which is rushed, which would be fine for this Assembly to hear today, if that is got wrong, that will have a devastating impact on children's education. So I'm committed to ensuring that there will be detailed proposals will be brought forward within the next couple of weeks that can be brought forward to this Assembly, certainly before the end of January, which I think will cover those situations. But I think it's more important that we get this right rather than get it immediate in that regard.
Call Robin Newton.